we're focusing on one of the most essential parts of special education, creating IEPs that actually work. This is a topic at the heart of your daily work with students and families.
To be eligible for an IEP, students have to meet these two eligibility requirements. So one, they have to have a diagnosis, one of those 13 disability categories outlined in the IDEA, right? And the child needs special education services to make progress in school and learn the general education curriculum. There are 3,417 different IEP templates, but at the core, IEPs have all the same parts. Well, all of the parts of an IEP connect to one another. You can't have one without the other. You really can't start at the end and get the beginning. Like, you really have to go through a succession of or a flow to get to the end point for the IEP to work. My suggestion is to always start with the present levels. The data is always in the present levels. That is what your meat and potatoes of your IEP. Everything in the IEP is based off of the data. The data is fact, fact, fact. It is not an opinion. So everything in the present levels is fact. You have data to prove it, to show it, all of the things. My most favorite mistake, the juiciest of all the mistakes, because I could stand on this pedestal forever. If you have ever written or read 80% accuracy in 3 or 4 trials in an IEP, I promise you, including myself, because I will never throw anyone under the bus except for myself, has either written or seen, and I've written it. IEP goals have to be SMART. We all know this acronym. We throw it around. We know what it means: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant or results-oriented, time-bound, right? But when it comes to criteria, we just go to that 80% accuracy, or always choose that accuracy criteria, which isn't always inappropriate or incorrect. In the IDEA law, the purpose of the whole shebang is because IEPs were designed to meet a student's unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So if functional skills are helping students meet their individual needs to live as independently as possible, how do you know an IEP was copy and pasted? Wrong pronouns, wrong name, incorrect data, no data. There's no changes made. They just copied it from one year and moved it right to the next. However, there's a difference between copy and pasting from one IEP and using templates, using goal banks, using similar wording. Everything is broken down into these sections. You start with that blank template every time. It just has to think about the data to input it, right? Which you're going to have in front of you when you're writing the present levels. So use those templates. What is the most IEP goals you've ever seen in a student's IEP? 12, 10, 20, 60? I'm sorry. There's no way that you can focus on all of them with the same intensity, the same consistency every day, every week. Like, there's just no way. You're going to burn out. You really want to focus on 3 to 5 goals. How do you choose those 3 to 5? You have conversations at the IEP team with the IEP team at the IEP table. You look at skills that they are, for lack of a better term, most behind on compared to their peers, and work on those skills because you want them to catch up with their peers, right? Have those priority conversations with parents as well. Writing too many skills in one IEP goal. So not only do we not want to have 64 different IEP goals, we also don't want to have 4 different skills written into one IEP goal. One goal, one skill. One objective, one skill. Every specific skill needs to have its own goal or objective. We're not putting them together. I don't want you to IEP alone anymore. I am very fully aware as a special education teacher that we often feel like we are on an island of one, but I guarantee you that we're not, because there are over 100 of you here today at this webinar after hours at, well, 6:30 my time, so 7:30 Eastern time, learning about IEPs. So that should show you, one, that you're not alone in this. So your present level should include all of these things. So you want to touch on all of these different sections within your present levels, because when you have all of this data, honestly, the rest of the IEP just kind of writes itself, which would be so nice if it actually did that. But theoretically, like, it writes itself because the data's there. If there is a need in the present levels, because we know that to write a goal, we need a need. Well, if there's a need in the present levels, you don't necessarily always need a goal. Sometimes you might just need a service. So your present levels are going to affect all of your different parts of the IEP because that is the data. And it brings it full circle when you progress monitor, because you're showing that we're taking data to show that these supports and services are working, that we're making mastery to these goals and objectives, that we're generalizing these skills. Here's how they're making progress. Here's how they're not making progress, right? So the data in the present levels to the progress monitoring brings it full circle. So accommodations, modifications, adaptations, they are three different things. So the accommodations are the how. How is the student performing the skill or showing you that they know this skill? The modification is a change in the what. What are they expected to learn? What do they need to demonstrate to you to show mastery of this skill? Where the accommodations, you're not going to change the skill being taught. You're not changing the level of performance or the skill mastery, right? You're changing just the how. So maybe instead of them writing sight words, they're going to type it. It's a breakdown of accommodations and modifications, because generally what we see with accommodations and modifications, I'm going to call them supports, is we have either there's a box on your IEP, in your IEP writing system, where you can type in what the accommodation or modification is, or there's a drop-down box. This is where a lot of gen ed teachers get stuck up, not like nose in the air stuck up, but like caught up on implementation of IEPs, because they get an IEP and they have no idea what it means or what it looks like to implement this IEP with fidelity. It's very overwhelming. Now, deficit-based language is focusing on what the student cannot do, what they're lacking, where they're behind. It's going to sound really negative, and it's going to make the IEP sound like a really long laundry list of problems that we have to fix. So strengths-based language is going to highlight what the student can do. It's going to highlight their interests, their abilities, their areas of progress, and then it's going to identify those opportunities for growth. So we're still talking about what the student cannot do yet, but we're highlighting it with their interests. We're framing the IEP as a tool to help the student learn the general education curriculum, access the learning, and reach their full potential. There's a lot of different types of data. You have direct and indirect data. Direct data examples, work samples, performance, quiz and test scores, in-person observations on behavior. Indirect data are rating scales, surveys, interviews, questionnaires, checklists. Formative and summative. We are all very familiar with different types of formative and summative types of data. Formal and informal, same thing here. You then have qualitative and quantitative data. Qualitative is going to be anecdotal notes, observations, input forms, the quality of a student's work, because it is important. Quality is important, and sometimes quantity is important as well. Test scores, frequency of behavior, how long the behavior lasts, the percent of correct responses. Then you have product and process data. So product data is like a writing sample. A process data is where you're capturing how the student made that finished product. And then we talked about baseline and your progress monitoring. So your baseline is just the initial number collected on a student's performance before any instruction begins. Your progress monitoring is that continuous ongoing collection of data as students work towards achieving their IEP goals. Without data, we cannot make decisions for our students and their IEPs. From collecting the data, there's like a continuum of data collection as well.